Welcome to the next in the series of AI Unleashed. Be careful what you wish for. It's out there, and is it doing what you want it to do? So my guest today is Nick Levy from IBM, and he's a specialist in AI for the banking industry. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, thanks, Doug, for having me over today.
So you've stated that AI is transforming banking at entry level from back office to boardroom. Could you share some concrete examples of how banks are seeing this transformation playing out?
Yeah, sure, Doug. I mean, look, AI has captured the imagination of lots of people across the financial services industry and many industries, and banking's no exception. We've seen already the adoption of AI at lots of different levels in these banking organizations. Examples would include the deployment of AI into the contact center, where we're seeing AI as almost the advisor on the advisor's shoulder while they're engaging customers in a contact center, providing them prompts and guidance in real time on their conversation, as well as wrapping up a call and providing call summarization at the end of a call so that they can capture the pertinent points and actions into the CRM system. We're also seeing banks using AI in innovative ways, looking, for example, in their loan portfolio to identify potential defaults in their business lending portfolio, for example, and then creating tailored and personalized prompts to see if they can provide assistance to those organizations to reduce the risk of losses. And then we've seen the deployment of AI into the technology of organizations of these banking enterprises. So, for example, developer productivity with coding assistance. We see up to 40% productivity improvements when AI is deployed in certain use cases. So huge impact, huge adoption, and it's only going to gather more and more pace as organizations see the benefits and the opportunities that AI is presenting them.
Yeah, sure. And presumably fraud detection and compliance are crucial in the financial sector. So how is AI enhancing these areas, and what challenges still need to be addressed?
It's a great question, Doug. And look, these two areas are probably spaces where what I'm going to call traditional or established AI technologies have been used for some time, looking at applying pattern recognition and other AI techniques into fraud detection. I think we're seeing vast opportunities, and we're seeing new interesting ways of applying the most modern emerging types of AI, agentic AI, for example, into those areas to allow really banks to reduce operational costs, but also, and I think this is fundamental, is really improve the customer experience. So when I go to make a payment, particularly in a retail or commercial banking context, I want that payment to succeed, and my bank's role is to obviously facilitate that payment, but also to protect me as a customer or a client. So when they're using AI to reduce losses, but also improve the customer experience, I think that starts to get hugely powerful. One of the areas that we're definitely seeing more and more adoption of the AI around is in really complex network recognition. So a lot of the fraud cases that banks sees will often be interconnected networks of individuals and money moving through the banking system, being laundered in various different ways. And I think we're starting to see some really powerful AI-based solutions to start to address some of those challenges and reduce losses in that space.
Okay, so personalization has become a major theme in AI-driven customer engagement. How are the banks leveraging AI to create smarter and more personalized interactions with their customers?
Again, Doug, I think this is a fantastic area where there's going to be huge progress, and we've already seen some very innovative use cases of the latest generation of AI technologies driving personalization. We can see already examples in the retail banking context where we can see personalized nudges coming into the feed and coming into the digital experiences online and in the mobile channel that banks are providing. I think the banks that have started to deploy that technology have seen the real power of being able to personalize down to the kind of holy grail of a segment of one. I think over time, banks have come to deliver personalization against segments of customers and done a pretty good job at times of starting to move in that direction. But I think the most powerful AI technologies we have today really allow people to get down to that truly tailored and individual level of personalization. So, the day after I book a holiday or a flight and my bank sees that transaction going through my account, I'm then targeted with a very personalized offer for insurance. Perhaps I've booked a nice golf holiday to Spain, so that tailored offer not just offers me insurance, but it offers to protect my golf clubs because they know I'm a golfer. They can work out which resort I'm going to, and suddenly that has a lot more resonance with me as an individual. And Doug, I think you're a keen golfer as well, right? So you can imagine how that might be more appealing than a more generalized offer coming in your mobile app, for example.
For sure, for sure. So what about in the boardroom with the strategic decision making? How do you see AI shaping the high-level business strategy in financial institutions?
Yeah, I think two or three key kind of considerations in this space. One is, I think, and I'm sure we'll touch more on this because it's such an important topic, is how do the board make sure that the deployment of AI is controlled and ethical and responsible? How do they make sure they can answer questions from their regulators? For example, how many AI agents do you have deployed? How many decisions have your AI agents made recently? What data is your AI workforce using to make decisions, right? Those are board level kind of macro questions that I think organizations and boards need to be able to make sure they can understand and how they know are going to be able to answer those. I think secondly would be which organizations will they strategically partner with? And that will be an important decision because the ecosystem of different service providers and solution providers and technology organizations is incredibly complex. This is a fast-moving, emergent technology. Some of the work is right at the frontier of kind of engineering and computing. And so choosing the right partners is going to be incredibly important. And again, I think that's where boards can have an important role in making sure they are kind of choosing to work with and partner with the right organizations that will have a good ability to execute in the medium and long term. I think right now there's a kind of short-term horizon. There's lots of organizations that might be successful today, but boards and financial services organizations have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that they are selecting and investing in the utilization of technologies and therefore partners who provide those technologies over a longer time horizon. And then I think third and critically, how are boards making sure that organizations develop the right skill set to be able to take advantage of these technologies going forward? If we go back maybe 5 years or so, I think a similar conversation could have been had around data and data science. Social media might be another one, cloud another one. Each time these technologies come along, I think organizations and their leadership teams, and therefore the board, need to be asking questions and making decisions around how we're making sure that our organization has these skills and capabilities required to really maximize the value we gain and the competitive advantage we gain from these technologies.
So, deploying AI is obviously going to be tricky for some. What are the common pitfalls that banks face when trying to implement AI, and how do they overcome them?
I think, look, AI has captured the imagination. I think I said that before, and it's been a fantastic kind of curve, actually, because you can go to ChatGPT or one of these tools that are accessible online, and within 30 seconds, because it's a conversational experience, you can start to use AI and the conversational AI tools, and you get this kind of instant gratification, right? Which makes it feel as if that's a really, really simple task to start using. But of course, there's much more to scaling AI than just being able to, use this conversational generative engine to produce content, right? So I touched upon it before around ethical and responsible AI. So I don't think I'm going to go too far into that now, but I think that's clearly part of it. I think the other two areas that I would focus on are, one, the sourcing of data. How do you know that you're feeding the right data into your AI engine and your solution? How are you making sure that it's really sourcing safe, reliable, trustworthy data? And I think that's probably probably the number one thing that you need when you're scaling. The second kind of pitfall is not to get sidetracked by doing many different proof of concepts around AI, but to find a small number that you can make genuine, real progress on that give the organization some learning opportunities on how to successfully get those scaled and to deliver impact for your organization. And maybe as a bonus thought, right, is try and find the safe zone to start with, right? So I think, the system that generates the canteen menu, as I often joke, right, is kind of safe territory, right? It's kind of like the regulator won't get too upset. Your customers aren't going to start phoning you up and getting very upset about stuff. So as an example, when we were talking about that contact center set of use cases before, I think call summarization is a really good example of a safe use case that organizations can start with, because if the summarization of the call is a tiny bit inaccurate, or if there's a tiny lag in that going on in terms of timing, then actually that's okay. It's not customer impacting, and your regulator, again, wouldn't be upset about it. So I think start in the safe spaces, think carefully about the data, and think carefully about focus, depth, if you will, rather than breadth to start with.
Yeah. And so what about the big worry that everybody seems to have about jobs? I mean, does AI complement existing jobs or replace them?
I think we should be excited about the opportunity that AI is going to bring to society in a really broad sense. I think there's some more distance to go. I don't think we're quite there yet, and I think we're in this kind of great scaling phase, which is super exciting. I think AI will shift how work is done and what work is done and where the humans create value, right? So if I look back I look backwards to look forwards, maybe, if I can speak of it like that. So if I look back at how kind of weaving and industrial looms came along in the Industrial Revolution many decades ago, I'm sure all the craftspeople, the weavers who were weaving cloth by hand at the time, were completely devastated by the arrival of the loom. Okay, but actually, look what it's done for our society. We've got huge development, and many of those people will have gone on to find new jobs in new parts of that same industry, or moved into different industries, right, and had new opportunities to do something creative. So I think history teaches us that technology generally tends to create more work rather than less, but it changes the nature of work and it shifts where the value is created from the work that we've done. I think AI is a really interesting technology because actually it's not just going to displace or shift people away from doing maybe repetitive manual work. There'll be some other work that maybe we might think of, well, okay, that's really uniquely human, something very creative, for example. And actually, at the moment, there's lots of arguments to say whether it is or isn't good at doing some of that creative work. I think my view is AI is like an adolescent teenager at the moment. It hasn't really grown up. It's not as mature as it could be, but it's going to get there, and it's going to get there super fast, right? Because the rate of progress is huge. And as it comes along, I think there will be a shift in how the workforce is occupied, the value it creates. And I'm sure we'll all still sadly be working really hard in many respects, but I hope, I guess, that the work that we do is more valuable and more enduring in that sense. Yeah.
So I guess, taking your analogy further, I guess we are the parents of these adolescent teenagers, and I know how rough a time I've had with my teenagers at one point. But in terms of the banking world, so how do regulators and policymakers keep pace with the transformation that's happening?
Look, I mean, again, looking backwards to look forwards again, right? The regulators and policymakers have had to pivot many times over the last few decades. And I look at cloud as the great example, right? That regulators had to do a huge amount of work to really get their heads around how cloud technology could be used safely in the financial services and banking industry. And we see banks, not just in the UK, but across the world, who are now embracing cloud technologies, scaling services, putting mission critical services into the cloud, and doing that in lockstep, with the regulators, having a very transparent but robust set of conversations around those technologies. And I'm absolutely convinced that AI will be the same. There are some learning cycles that the regulators are going to need to go through. I think there's already a lot of regulation coming out. We've seen the EU come out with AI regulation. We've seen more coming through from the US. We see more coming through from Asia. And my slight hope is that there'll be some level of unification across all of this, because I think actually if we can simplify, that would be really, really good. But I think actually most banking organizations and most regulators have a kind of single point of focus, which is to do the right thing for customers, to protect customers, but also to promote growth and a healthy, reliable banking system. And so, whilst we keep all of those in focus, my optimistic, positive self says that, regulatory environment will be largely helpful for AI.
Okay, let's get your crystal ball out. For the next 5 to 10 years, what do you see are the biggest AI innovations that you believe will reshape banking?
Yeah, look, I think it's a very fast moving space, and it'd be a brave soul to kind of look too deep into the crystal ball. But I would say 2 or 3 things. So one is going back to the slightly unruly adolescent teenager analogy. And I think there's studies on this, by the way, right? I think I read that, by the time we're about 4 years old, we've seen something like 4 billion different things, or some sort of, if you break down all the different stimulations and visual things, or 4 billion is like a data point that most models in some of this AI technology have seen, right? So actually, they're somewhere between a 4 and a 14-year-old in terms of their level of intelligence, which is, they're super smart, don't get me wrong. But I think number one crystal ball moment will be these models will get more and more powerful, right? Because actually we're going to get, evolution of the model evolution, right? The second will be the whole price point around generative AI, particularly, and inferencing costs is going to plummet down. I think we've seen that trend with cloud computing to a certain degree. So the cost of compute generally has gone down a lot over the years. I think AI is going to ride on the same rails, but generative AI inferencing costs are going to come massively down. We see huge innovations in chip design, huge innovations and optimization around software and algorithm design. And clearly it's an incredibly competitive market. And then actually, I think the third kind of thing, if you will, crystal ball thing that we're going to see, particularly from a kind of financial services and banking perspective, is the unlocking of data. So 70-80% of data that the enterprise has, that banks have, is still completely inaccessible to any of these AI models. And so I think the next few years there's going to be a lot of unlocking data, and that's going to spin off a huge amount of value, new and exciting use cases, and great opportunities. And that will have to be balanced, and maybe is an enduring theme of our conversation today, but it will have to be balanced with the ethical and responsible use of that data and the AI capabilities that go on.
Okay, good. Well, and finally then, there's someone out there wondering, what they should be doing in terms of their AI journey and whether they're doing it and within their organisation. What would you say are the first steps they should take to ensure successful integration and the long-term impact?
Yeah, I think a couple of great first steps would be first, executive sponsorship of all of this. Work out who the leader is, right? Because ultimately there's going to be some prioritization and some decisions. So make sure you've got a leader. Second would be education and enablement. I think that unlike some prior technologies where a small group of technologists have delivered that technology for a large group of consumers. Again, think small group of cloud engineers delivered the cloud for the organization. I think the pyramid's going to get inverted, and I think a very wide group of people are going to create or be involved in creating and crafting AI solutions. So I think, huge education and enablement efforts across the organization are really, really important. And then third would be allow people to touch the technology. My kind of guiding philosophy on these things is we learn by experiential learning. Sadly, we also learn a lot by failure. So allow people to learn and experiment in a safe way, But I think let people touch the technology within the enterprise, right? It's very different to going on to ChatGPT and asking for a cookie day recipe. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about safely within the firewall, within the guardrails of the organization. Let people build and experiment with AI solutions, and don't leave it to a small group of people quietly in the corner, but really go and empower the citizens, if you will, of your organization to do that, because they will unleash great value for the business, I'm sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for taking your time out today to come and talk to us. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people finding a lot of value in what you've just said. I look forward to speaking to you again, perhaps one time in the future. Thanks, Nick.
No, pleasure. Thank you.